Coast are taking to brace for impact.
Tonight, Florida's largest mass evacuation in 12 years is underway. Miami Beach boarded up. Nearly 700,000 people urged to head inland. A traffic nightmare as Irma creeps closer.
This is devastating. It's scary. And people get crazy.
After more than 30,000 people bolted from the Florida Keys, there's a desperate need for gas. Police escorting fuel supply trucks. More than a quarter of the stations in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Naples are dry.
Everything is shut down.
Another concern, price gouging, fury exploding online.
Someone was charging over $70 for a pack of water.
They feel like they're being taken advantage of.
Florida's Attorney General saying her call center has taken more than 3,000 calls.
That's sickening, it's disgusting, it's unacceptable, and we're not going to have it.
Amid fears of widespread flooding and catastrophic storm surge on both coasts, in Fort Myers, search and rescue teams are already gearing up.
This is serious, and we cannot take chances. It is life-threatening. This is not a storm you can sit and wait through.
Millions under a state of emergency up the East Coast, Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. 25 years ago, another deadly Category 5 hurricane, Andrew, sliced through Florida. But Irma's nearly twice as big as that storm and wider than the entire state of Florida, making it harder for evacuees to escape the storm's path. Given the storm's forecast, where can people go to escape this?
They need to go to one of our shelters, and they need to go quick. And matter of fact, that's the place to go.
Miami's Metro Zoo, rebuilt after Andrew leveled it, is now bracing for another devastating blow. And across South Florida, families and their pets are streaming to newly opened shelters.
Oh, it's frightening. Extremely frightening.
Morgan Chesney's Gonzalez and her family are spending their first night away from home.
We didn't really want to take any chances because I have children, and so we decided then that, before the rush of everybody trying to make a mass exodus, then we would try and get ahead.
Ahead of the frantic rush to outrun Irma before it's too late.
Hurricane warnings up for South Florida and the Florida Keys. Those watches extend all the way now up toward Vero Beach, over towards Sarasota. We could see hurricane force winds here within 36 hours. Then back toward the islands, hurricane warnings for the Turks and Caicos, up toward the Bahamas, the north coast of Cuba, and the north coast of Haiti, also under a hurricane warning. There is the center of Irma right now, moving through the Turks and Caicos. It will continue, we think, moving toward a westerly direction, probably through this goalpost between Cuba and the Bahamas, and then eventually on up toward South Florida. Winds of 165 miles per hour. Right in the center of the storm. Still a Category 5 hurricane. Central pressure very low at 920 millibars, moving toward the northwest at 16 miles per hour. On this path, we think it will probably get to South Florida sometime Saturday evening on into Sunday morning. We'll be watching the possibility of it being maybe a Category 4 or 5 hurricane, and then maybe even a Category 3, a major hurricane through Florida, and then making its way on up into the deep south, bringing gusty winds as well as heavy rainfall throughout that area too. The models indicate that it could skirt the east Florida here right now. They're in pretty much agreement that that's going to continue to move off toward the north here. So again, under hurricane warnings here in South Florida, this includes West Palm Beach, Miami, all the way over toward Naples and southward through the Keys. So this is an area that could see high waves and storm surge. And Ray, let's talk about that a little bit, the water rise.
Yeah, we will have water rise and we'll have wind too, Nick, and that wind is going to start arriving tropical storm force first, well out ahead of the center and landfall, and then eventually some hurricane force winds. Now, let's pick a point here, Marathon. Let's understand too, let's in and around the area that Saturday morning through Sunday afternoon, tropical storm force winds of 40+ miles per hour with gusts, and then hurricane force winds expected Saturday afternoon through Sunday morning. Now, hurricane force winds do extend from the center at about 75 miles, so 75 miles either way of Marathon could experience at least some level of hurricane force winds, 8 to 12 inches of rainfall, and up to 10 foot of water rise or storm surge. Miami, Saturday morning through late Sunday, extended period of at least tropical storm force winds. The gusts could exceed 100 miles per hour. Sunday morning, 12 to 18 inches of rain. Add on top of that 10 foot of surge. There will be A lot of coastal flooding around Fort Myers Saturday afternoon through Monday morning. Tropical storm force wind gusts at 40+ miles per hour. Hurricane force on Sunday with some of the wind gusts. Little less rain, about 5 to 8 inches of rain. Right now you're forecast to be on the west side of the center of Irma. And then Orlando, you're even going to see some hurricane wind gusts, 75 miles per hour as we get on through late Sunday, early Monday, and 8 to 12 inches of rainfall. So remember, right now Irma's forecast to come right up through the heart of Florida. In Orlando, you may be on the east side and experience some of those significant winds in excess of hurricane force. West Palm Beach, the same with your tropical storm force winds Saturday morning through Monday morning. And we'll continue to watch this wind field expand just a little bit as it has over the past couple of days. Tropical storm force winds right now extend out from the center 185 miles. So your 39 to 73 mile per hour winds away from the hurricane force winds do extend out quite a distance from the center. And your probabilities now of seeing tropical storm force winds high from about Orlando and points south at about 80% here, 90% from just north of Lake Okeechobee near the Space Coast and points south. So this is where winds go 39 to 74 miles per hour. Your hurricane force winds looking a little bit more likely now in and around South Miami-Dade County over toward Collier County and points further south into Monroe County in South Florida. And then your timing of your tropical storm force winds coming in as we get on through early Saturday morning here in South Florida and then extending north, maybe even into North Georgia as early as 8 o'clock Monday morning. And your Hurricane Irma track here showing where these winds are going to be. And watch this wind field continue to expand and move north here as we get into the midday hours on Sunday. Significant wind, hurricane force winds expected in Central and South Florida.
New video in from the Turks and Caicos. Strong winds battered the area yesterday as Hurricane Irma descended upon the Caribbean islands here. Check out the wind and the rain that hit Grace Bay Beach. Irma is expected to bring storm surges of up to 20 feet across the Turks and Caicos.
Yeah, that could end up being pretty significant. Some of those islands may actually go underwater. Yeah. As Hurricane Irma continues on its track, you're going to hear a lot about the impact from storm surge.
Yeah, but what does it mean when we say it could reach 6 or 7 or even 10 feet? Our hurricane expert and former head of the National Hurricane Center, Dr. Rick Knabb, shows us just how high that water can reach and the impacts as it rises.
Now, it's one thing to show you what it looks like on a map. What would it look like in reality? Let's fantasize reality a little bit here. Let's start in that blue area. What would it look like if you had 1 to 3 feet of storm surge flooding? That's already bad because just a couple feet of water can float a car and take it away. And it would be over the heads of children if you had 3 feet of storm surge flooding. Once we get to 3 feet, we're talking about life-threatening. You get above that, now you get to 6 feet, you're above my head. I don't want to be in that storm surge. It's not just the water getting higher, but the water is moving. There are dangerous battering waves on top of that. And there is stuff in the water, dangerous stuff. And this could easily take your life. And if it goes above 6 feet, it is fully capable of not just flooding the structure, but wiping it clean off the foundation. This is why storm surge is so life-threatening.
And this is why, of course, we've had so many evacuations. Waves on top of the surge could be significant.
Yeah, they could. And as you heard Dr. Rick Knabb say, you're not only going to have waves pushing from that wind coming in onshore, you're going to have actual waves coming in from the surf on top of that. And this is when the maximum wave heights are expected, along with that water rise, Nick, as we go through Saturday night into Sunday morning. That's here right around Biscayne Bay in Miami, in and around Miami.
And then watch as we continue to see those waves really kick up along the Georgia and South Carolina coast too. We're talking about, 25, maybe 30-foot waves here making their way onshore.
Right, and you can put that on top of a water rise of a couple of feet, or even in some spots in Florida, maybe 6 to maybe 10 feet. And we're going to have significant problems with flooding and flooding all along the coast if we keep Irma on its current path.
With the high all the way toward the north here, that's already bringing those east winds just continuing to batter. And then, of course, we've got Irma that's doing the same thing, that area of low pressure, drawing in the water and pushing it all the way toward the coast, all working together to provide waves that could go even higher.
Yeah, and some of these places will flood with just a strong high and just a pressure gradient wind pushing along shore here in South Florida. So when you actually get something like a Category 4 hurricane coming in with those winds and then that push from that high, Nick, expecting potential storm surge to be very significant.
Well, high anxiety in Florida as people brace for Hurricane Irma. Residents not just worried about the destructive winds, but also about critical infrastructure designed to hold the water back and keep neighborhoods from a flood disaster.
Yeah, and NBC's Kerry Sanders has more from Moorhaven, Florida.
A reservoir flooding during Hurricane Harvey. Homes submerged, people scrambling to get out. That's the nightmare scenario in Florida for Marianne Martin.
It's a man-made hill.
And that's the dike?
Yes.
She lives near the Herbert Hoover Dike, holding back water from Lake Okeechobee. 40,000 at risk if that dike fails, as happened in New Orleans during Katrina.
This is not a case of you just crossing your fingers then?
No, it's not. And I hope I don't have to regret saying that.
A warning the Florida governor is issuing tonight.
The biggest risk on the dike at Okeechobee is too much rain. That's why they're lowering levels.
Lake Okeechobee so large it's visible from outer space, more than 700 square miles. Now, the race to lower water levels, critical because with just 1 foot of rain from Irma, the lake will rise more than 3 feet. The dike, 90 years in the making, is in desperate need of critical repairs. A $1.5 billion fix is now underway. The Army Corps of Engineers recognizes the potential. Their own report says, depending on the potential location of a breach, the life loss, economic, and adverse environmental consequences of a breach are considered very high.
The floods would potentially inundate entire communities, and this is, of course, certainly something the Corps of Engineers wants to avoid at all costs.
That rushing water that you hear and sea is a desperate effort to get as much water out of the lake before Irma arrives. The Army Corps of Engineers says it believes the dike will hold, but Irma will dump more than 20 inches of rain.
Yeah, we're certainly hoping that we get these dikes holding and we don't see as high water rise as we are expecting, but it's possible. And Nick, what we've got, the 2 a.m. advisory has come in. You usually don't see big changes, but there are some subtle changes.
Subtle changes. The winds are down just a little bit, 160 miles per hour. The pressure is up, so weakening somewhat, but still, it is a Category 5.
We'll have more on it coming up just a second. Hurricane Irma still a powerful Category 5 hurricane. However, with the 2 a.m. advisory now coming in from the Hurricane Center, we have had some changes, and changes include a little bit lower wind speed now at 160, so that still makes Irma a Category 5 hurricane, and the pressure is up 5 millibars to 925 millibars. So let's take a look at the latest here. Once again, the winds now at 160 miles per hour, still a powerful Category 5 storm. Pressure at 925 millibars, like we said, that's up 5 millibars from the last update 3 hours ago. Moving west-northwesterly, still at 16 miles per hour. If you are tracking 21.5 northern latitude, the longitude at 73.3 west, about 20 miles north of the Great Anguilla Island, and heading on off to the west and the northwest. Now, right now, for the islands, hurricane warnings for the Bahamas, the Turks and Caicos. These will probably be experiencing hurricane conditions now or shortly, and the Bahamas, the northwestern Bahamas, as we head on through the next few hours and into the early morning hours on Friday. The north coast here of Cuba, hurricane warnings and tropical storm warnings further south. Parts of Haiti also under hurricane warnings and or tropical storm warnings. Now, here's what we can see from the current satellite picture. This is the GOES enhanced satellite, where we do show the colorized cloud tops, which shows kind of these pink and darker purple colors. And you can see here over on the northern side of the eye wall that we do have a little bit less in terms of those higher, colder cloud tops. Thus, probably what's responsible for that little bit of weakening, maybe a little dry air, some shear going on here, but still a very powerful, very dangerous storm as it continues to head on off toward the west and northwest, and then eventually watching it head off to the north in more of a northerly direction as we head on through the next couple of days. So this puts a Category 4 and a strong one at that by Saturday evening, dangerously close to South Florida. And then as we go on through Saturday night and early Sunday, probably going to have somewhere in South Florida either a strong Category 4 storm or a Category 3 storm on the high end as it heads onshore and does make landfall, at least under the current projection from the National Hurricane Center. Most of the model guidance in agreement that we may see something make landfall in South Florida, but of course with our cone out in this direction, anything deviation to the left and right could mean big changes for folks on the west coast of Florida and just as well on the east coast. But here are the warnings now, upgraded just a few hours ago to hurricane warnings for Miami, Key Largo, over to Collier and Monroe counties too. And now these are fairly new, the hurricane watches. That means within 48 hours, hurricane conditions are possible from Vero Beach right on across into the Sarasota area. Tampa Bay area, not yet, but that could be coming here as we head on through the next couple of days. Actually, those extended warnings are those warnings are most likely going to be extended further north. And notice too, even down into the Keys, we do have hurricane warnings in effect, meaning within 36 hours, we are expecting to see hurricane conditions in these areas. Meanwhile, parts of the Caribbean still reeling from Hurricane Irma. The powerful storm cut a deadly path of destruction through the region, flattening entire communities. NBC's Morgan Radford has a look at the damage from San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Hurricane Irma ripping through the Caribbean, bringing death and destruction and leaving thousands homeless. In Barbuda, houses underwater, cars floating through the streets. Among the dead, a 2-year-old killed while a family was trying to escape. Most of the island left uninhabitable and almost impossible to reach. In St. Martin, homes with no power or running water. Businesses completely destroyed. Military planes sending emergency food and water. Thousands remain stranded, like David Elliott and Trey Harris, who traveled to Turks and Caicos from North Carolina for vacation. Now left with no choice but to ride out the hurricane.
We're trying to keep it as upbeat and positive here as we can. We keep assuring everyone back home that we are safe. We're in the safest spot on this island.
Puerto Rico was spared a direct hit, but raging winds tore down power lines and trees, smashing through Sammy's small restaurant.
Wow,
now he has no income, just as tourists are beginning to arrive.
Almost 1 million people are still without power. That's why they've come to central markets like this to charge their cell phones, find running water, and get hot food.
No water.
No water, and there's no electricity.
No. You get warm down here, it's hot, and with no electricity is the worst part.
But just as the cleanup begins, warnings tonight, another major hurricane may be on the way.
So you see what Irma has done already, even without a direct hit. And beyond Florida, we still have a lot of uncertainty as to where this is going to go and who might be affected. We're talking about Georgia, we're talking about South Carolina, and even farther toward the north could see some heavy rain and some gusty winds as well. We'll be watching for that possibility. Hurricane Irma models taking it all the way up into Georgia here, and then beyond that a little bit toward the west, although one model takes it a little farther toward the north. So there really is some uncertainty as to the exact path of this. And of course, for places like Georgia and the Carolinas, that's going to make all the difference in the world. Tropical storm force winds, pretty much a certainty here around southern Florida and on up through the peninsula and even into Georgia and South Carolina. A pretty good chance. Hurricane force winds, we'll see those even possible up into Georgia and South Carolina, but looks like it's a certainty there just to the South Florida area. So here's what one model depicts: the movement of Irma coming up through Florida, probably making landfall sometime into Saturday evening, into Sunday morning. We're watching that possibility, and then on up into Georgia with more heavy rainfall moving through that area. Into South Carolina, the rainfall, particularly along the coast, could be quite heavy, 4 to 5 inches, and farther toward the south from Savannah, we could see 7 to 8 inches there. Well, there is still time to prepare for Hurricane Irma before coming up.
This is serious, and we cannot take chances. It is life-threatening.
This is a dangerous storm.
There's no gas, there's no food, there's no ice, there's nothing.
Follow the news, follow the Weather Channel. I'm going to be very aggressive at getting the state ready. You need to be very aggressive at getting your family ready.
Our special coverage of Hurricane Irma continues right here on the Weather Channel.
And a powerful storm we have as South Florida is bracing for deadly wind, rain, surge after Irma devastated the Caribbean, killing at least 12 people. A southeast under the gun next, and they're going to feel the wrath of Irma for days to come.
Got some new video just in showing how devastating Hurricane Irma was to the island of Barbuda. Wow, take a look at the aerial look of this destruction. At least one person has died here in the French territory, and we're told that 95% of the island is uninhabitable at this time.
Yeah, that's just incredible, and more of the islands now being affected. U.S. Virgin Islands, it's already passed, and now heading into the Bahamas. Let's get you updated on what we know right now about Hurricane Irma. Miami-Dade evacuation orders now include 650,000 residents. That makes this the largest attempted evacuation of Miami-Dade County on record. Florida's governor has ordered all public schools, colleges, and universities to close Friday through Monday. 4,000 commercial airline flights in Irma's path have been canceled. Irma is a deadly hurricane. At least 12 people have died in the islands. And Nick, what we're hoping for is that we don't see that total go up. I don't know if there's a way to get away from the destruction and the surge. Right now, it looks like South Florida and maybe the entire Florida Peninsula.
Yeah, we're just trying to save lives at this point for sure. Certainly hurricane force winds being felt around the Turks and Caicos right now. The warnings are up for that. On up toward the Bahamas, northern coast of Cuba could see that. Northern coast of Haiti also under hurricane warnings, as is the South Florida area down through the Keys. We have hurricane watches a little farther toward the north, and that covers areas from Vero Beach on the Atlantic side over toward the Gulf to Sarasota. That's an area that could see just devastating winds as well as heavy rainfall. And of course, on the coast, we're going to be dealing with that surge. There is the center of Irma right now, moving through the Turks and Caicos, going to continue off toward the west and probably make its way through this area here, south of the Bahamas, north of Cuba, at least the center of the storm. That's where the path is going to be. So good news is the center isn't going to go right over the Bahamas, it looks like right now, according to our path, though it might graze the north coast of Cuba and then making its way up into South Florida and then northward beyond that. It gets a little bit more uncertain up in this area exactly where the center of that hurricane is going to be. And of course, that will make a difference in the winds. It will make a difference in the surge. And and just how much that is. This is what the models are showing, and basically in fairly good agreement on the path here up through Florida, taking it right along the east coast there and bringing in that possible surge and very gusty winds. Again, hurricane warnings out for South Florida. As model runs are showing the potential course for Irma inching to the west, concern is rising along Florida's west or Gulf side coast. That includes Naples, and our Paul Goodlow is there, dodging the storms at times this evening.
I'm here on the Naples Pier here in Collier County, where we had some thunderstorms today and this evening. Unfortunately, that kind of hampered, perhaps delayed some preparation of residents who are going to weather this storm out here from hopefully completing their preparations. As again, this area is under a hurricane watch, meaning within the next 48 hours, we are expecting to see and deal with hurricane force conditions. Again, weather going downhill dramatically as we had 24 hours from now, and especially all day long on Saturday and their closest approach sometime on Sunday in this area. And again, Collier County under a hurricane watch. To the north of us in Lee County, no watch yet. That could change as we head on towards Friday. And by the way, in Lee County, starting tomorrow, mandatory evacuations will be issued for all of the barrier islands starting at 1 p.m. on Friday. So mandatory evacuations in Lee County. And by the way, all the bridges that go across into the mainland here, the tolls will be waived as well there in Lee County. So there shouldn't be anything stopping people from getting off those barrier islands well before Irma heads its way into southwestern Florida. Also here in Collier County, the buses, the CAT, no fees for that as well. So if you need public transportation here in Collier County to get out and to get to even some of the shelters which will be opening up on Friday, again, here in Collier County. So again, we talked to the mayor earlier, and he's just hoping for the best. No mandatory evacuations in Naples, the city of Naples, but still, they are preparing for the worst and, of course, hoping for the best. This area, no stranger to hurricanes. The last one to impact this area was Hurricane Wilma back in 2005.
And it's been some time since a storm with Irma's intensity has hit the peninsula. And so let's get into now when we can expect tropical storm force winds and hurricane force winds and affecting basically anywhere from the Keys all the way up toward Jacksonville, maybe the Panhandle. Here's Marathon, Florida, early Saturday morning tropical storm force wind gusts continuing through Sunday afternoon. So prolonged period here of tropical storm force wind gusts, and some hurricane force winds are possible Saturday afternoon through Sunday morning. So that's the window. Now understand, if we do get a track that goes a little further west, this could be a more sustained period of hurricane force winds, rainfall 8 to 12 inches, and a storm surge up to 10 feet. This number here is significant. That will cause many places to have actually a pretty high water rise and some pretty significant flooding. In Miami now, where we may see the center pass just to your southwest, so you'd be on the eastern side of the eye wall. That could put 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts, maybe even up to 120 or higher Sunday morning as we approach its landfall of Irma on its current forecast track. 12 to 18 inches of rain. Throw on top of that a water rise of maybe 10 feet with storm surge. Certainly going to be some significant flooding over on the west coast of Fort Myers. Hurricane force gusts coming in sometime on Sunday. The rainfall 5 to 8 inches. Any track deviation from that, though, could increase that hurricane wind speed. Hurricane Irma continuing to leave a path of destruction. Look at this widespread damage after passing over the British Virgin Islands. We've got everything from bricks and mortar to sheetrock and wood. This new video coming in from the island of Tortola. British Virgin Island government building in Road Town was found abandoned yesterday. So Irma leaving its mark, and unfortunately it's been a deadly mark out across South Florida. They're gearing up to take the brunt of this storm as it comes through. Meteorologist Mike Bettis shows us what preparations are being taken in Hallandale Beach.
Preparations well underway across Broward County, right here in Hallandale Beach, in Fort Lauderdale, and in Miami because of Irma, a deadly Category 5 hurricane making its way closer and closer to the Sunshine State. As you can imagine, high population areas, there's a run on all the stores. People getting supplies, whether it be at the grocery stores and wiping the shelves clean of just about everything they have, or home improvement stores where you need plywood, you need nails, you need hammers, you need generators. All those things are going very, very quickly. In fact, most stores are sold out of all of those things. So if you haven't gotten them at this point, you may be out of luck. Now, once you have those things and you've made the preps and you've secured your home, you obviously then want to evacuate, and they've got more than a dozen shelters open in Broward County, and you can, at some shelters, actually take your pets. Not all take them, so check ahead and see which ones take pets. If you want to take your pet with you here in Broward County, you'll go to Millennium Middle School. Now, you don't have to pre-register your pet, but a couple of things to keep in mind, okay? You want to make sure that you take your vaccination records of your pet with you. They don't want anyone that doesn't have those. Also, make sure you have your pet registration, a photo of your pet, as well as your proof of residency in Broward County. Also, keep in mind the shelters are not providing food or water for your pets. Just a roof over their heads, so you'll need to take those items with you as well. If you have a crate for your pet, that's great. A bed, a leash, those things to make your pet more comfortable as well. But again, many shelters don't take pets, so check to make sure specific ones that you want to go to indeed do. Evacuations have been ordered. Mandatory evacuations for everyone east of Federal Highway in Broward County, the areas most susceptible to storm surge. That is the very latest here in Hallandale Beach, Florida. I'm meteorologist Mike Bettis.
And as evacuees hit the roads are getting clogged up. Even at this hour, after 2 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, we are seeing red on the map here along 75, and that means folks trying to make their way crawling northward here and even up into right along the Georgia-Florida border. It doesn't really let up until you get into Georgia, and then even areas between Macon and Atlanta are showing red on the map as well. You need to know your zone. FloridaDisaster.org is where to find it. Go to your state website to determine your local evacuation route. A few areas that you need to know about. The Florida Keys, there are mandatory evacuations for all visitors as well as all residents. Miami-Dade County, mandatory for zones A and B, parts of zone C, Barrier Islands. If you live in a mobile home, you need to evacuate. In Broward County, it's mandatory for mobile homes, barrier islands, and coastal areas east of the Federal Highway, US 1. Palm Beach, mandatory. Evacuations begin at 10 a.m. Friday for zones A and B, including mobile homes and barrier islands. That water rise, the waves, the wind, all concerns here for evacuees. That's why they're getting out of Dodge there, right?
Yeah, that's right, Nick. And we're expecting to see hurricane force winds cover a large swath of South Florida, Central Florida, maybe even further north. As we take a look at the wind field right now with Irma, and here's your hurricane force winds right in the core here, the center. And understand that 75 miles out from the center, that's how far hurricane force winds do extend. So that's 74 plus miles per hour. Now, the core of the 160 winds most likely right around the eye wall. So as you go out in distance from the center, obviously the winds get less. And then look at your tropical storm wind field. It is much greater. That extends out from the center about 185 miles. So here's the percentage over the next 5 days of tropical storm force winds. Very high percentage as far north maybe as Orlando and Jacksonville, getting into the 70 and 80%, 90% south of the Space Coast here and further on down toward the south and South Florida. Your hurricane force winds, this is where the destruction starts, getting up to about 60 or 70% out ahead into about the 4 or 5 day time frame. Now, your arrival of your tropical storm force winds, we could be in here in South Florida, Miami-Dade County as soon as early Saturday morning, and possibly getting into North Georgia by Monday morning. So we could feel effects from tropical storm force winds 39 plus miles per hour as far north as North Georgia. at this hour, parts of South Florida are under hurricane warnings, and the watches have actually been extended a little further north. Residents face the possibility of a catastrophic hurricane coming in, and that's Irma.
Our Justin Michaels is in Florida with a look at how they're getting ready there.
Hollywood, Florida certainly is in the path of what we now know a major hurricane. Whether it actually hits here has yet to be determined, but people here are not going to go into this unprepared. Somebody who's watching it all very closely, Josh Levy, the mayor of Hollywood. Josh, thanks so much for being with us. So, Mr. Mayor, as you are preparing your residents, what are you telling them, and are you pleased with preparations?
So look, we of course have a multitude of preparations that everyone needs to take care of. For, of course, their personal homes, their property, for themselves. We have evacuation orders mandatory on the beach, on the coastal areas east of Federal Highway. They need to listen to news reports, look at the weather reports, make sure they're following the track of the storm, and prepare their homes. Should we be in the path of the storm, we need to do everything to stay safe.
Well, I know a storm surge watch is in effect here right now. That's a concern of yours.
Oh, it's a very major concern for ourselves in Hollywood, also the coastal areas of Fort Lauderdale and Miami Beach. Low-lying coastal areas have a tidal flooding concern here with sea level rise in South Florida. If you couple that together with our high tides anticipated about the noontime, 1 p.m. hour and the 1 a.m. hour, coupled with a 5 to 8 foot storm surge, we might see pretty strong flooding in residential areas that are right on the coast.
And last question for you, Mayor. Is Hollywood, Florida as ready as it possibly can be for a hurricane like Irma?
I think we will be. I think we'll be as ready as we possibly can be. Everyone's boarding up their homes. Everyone's taking every precaution. The grocery stores like this one behind us have been busy at a frantic clip since the beginning about 2 days ago. I think we'll be as ready as we can be.
Mayor Josh Levy, Hollywood, Florida. Thank you for your time, sir. Stay safe. Sure. So like you heard, Mayor's pretty pleased with how preparations are going, but it's an ongoing process, and you know people here will be working up to the last minute to make sure they are certainly ready when Irma hits. In Hollywood, Florida, Justin Michaels, the Weather Channel.
It certainly looks, Nick, like everybody's taking the necessary precautions, and we'll talk more about the cone as the evening and the morning goes on, but right now, even the southeast of Tennessee Valley in play. Yeah, and we really need to be aware of beyond Florida, too, because we're going to be talking about very gusty winds. We're going to be talking about heavy rainfall. Let's take a live look at Savannah, Georgia, where mandatory evacuations are in place in coastal Georgia counties, areas east of I-95, including Savannah. The city closed all non-emergency services yesterday afternoon. Yeah, Nick, and beyond even South Florida, we're looking at impacts further north, and not only the entire peninsula here of Florida, probably affected in some way, but we're talking Georgia, maybe even on up to Tennessee, as most model guidance taking Irma pretty far north as a tropical storm. Yes, and tropical storm force winds could be felt even that far north, too. Let's look at where we're going to find the certainty of tropical storm force winds, and of course that's across areas of the Bahamas, northern portions of Cuba, on up into South Florida, and even a pretty good chance of seeing tropical storm force winds all the way up into Georgia and South Carolina. Yeah, I mean, you're talking 60–70% chance of hurricane force winds, mainly out across South Florida at about 60%, but I'd imagine those percentages, if our current forecast track holds true, will probably go a little bit higher, but even a low chance here in South Georgia and into the Carolinas. South Carolina especially, maybe some hurricane force winds. Here's what one model depicts the movement here as it moves right up into South Florida by the time we get into, say, Saturday and on into Sunday morning. And then from there, we'll continue to watch it make its way farther toward the north. Yeah, this could be some of the rain totals, too. And we had 6–7 inches of rainfall, maybe up to 9 or 10 inches in some spots along coastal Georgia and Florida. And depending on that exact track, you may also have a water rise here, too. So coastal flooding will be a big problem. That's why, of course, people are getting away from the coastline, heading farther toward the inland areas and farther toward the north. Yeah, so from Charleston down toward Tybee Island, coastal Georgia, South Carolina, should be taking necessary preparations.
This program brought to you by Dell Small Business.
Our special coverage of Hurricane Irma continues right here on the Weather Channel.
And South Florida is bracing for deadly winds and rain after the Irma devastated the Caribbean, killing at least 12 people, and the Southeast will be feeling the effects of Irma for days to come.
In Puerto Rico, boy, they felt the strong winds, toppling trees, and unfortunately, 3 people killed here in Puerto Rico due to the effects of Hurricane Irma. That 3 out of 12 total deaths so far. Obviously, even though it wasn't a direct hit on Puerto Rico, we certainly had its effects. As you can see, lots of tree branches down and buildings that were damaged as well.
Yeah, Nick, I don't even know if they got into the hurricane force winds. This could just be tropical storm force wind damage. And what we know right now, as we continue to see Irma churn out across the islands, is that Miami-Dade has ordered 650,000 residents to evacuate. That makes this the largest attempted evacuation of Miami-Dade County on record. Florida's governor has ordered all public schools, colleges, and universities to close Friday through Monday. 4,000 commercial airline flights in Irma's path have been canceled. And Irma, a deadly hurricane. At least 12 people have died in the islands. And Nick, unfortunately, I feel that that total may go up as we continue to see Irma, still powerful Category 5 storm, head northwest.
We may very well see a Category 5 storm, at least just before we get to a Florida landfall. It's definitely going to be a major hurricane, Category 3 or above. That's why we have the hurricane force winds that are being forecast for this area. And hurricane warnings for South Florida, including West Palm Beach, Miami, down through the Keys, Naples as well. Hurricane watches from Sarasota on the Gulf side all the way over toward Vero Beach on the Atlantic side. We still have those hurricane warnings out for the Turks and Caicos, up through the Bahamas, the north coast of Cuba, as well as the north coast of Haiti as well. Here's where the center of Irma is right now, making its way through the Turks and Caicos. Got a lot of areas of islands here, but it looks like, for the most part, it's going to go south of the Bahamas and north of Cuba. Let's hope it does that. But of course, when it does that, when it stays over open water, it's going to maintain its strength. And boy, is it ever strong. 160-mile-per-hour winds in the center as of the 2 a.m. advisory. Category 5 still. The pressure up just a little bit, so showing at least some signs of weakening. But you know, when you're talking about weakening with a Category 5 storm, it's just by degrees. You're still talking about a very, very powerful, very deadly storm. This is the path we expect to see it take, and then making its way up into the deep south to bring some gusty winds and rainfall there as well. So it looks like Florida, you're definitely going to feel the impacts of it no matter where that path is, whether it's on the west side of Florida or the east side of Florida or out over the water. The models take it right up the Atlantic side for the most part of Florida. Of course, from there, we may see it go farther toward the north or back toward the west a little bit. Again, hurricane warnings in effect for South Florida. As many as 700,000 people have been given evacuation orders to leave Florida as it stares down the barrel of Irma. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez reports on the preparations that states along the East Coast are taking to brace for impact.
Tonight, Florida's largest mass evacuation in 12 years is underway. Miami Beach boarded up. Nearly 700,000 people urged to head inland. A traffic nightmare as Irma creeps closer.
This is devastating. It's scary. And people get crazy.
After more than 30,000 people bolted from the Florida Keys, there's a desperate need for gas. Police escorting fuel supply trucks. More than a quarter of the stations in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Naples are dry.
Everything is shut down.
Another concern, price gouging, fury exploding online.
Someone was charging over $70 for a pack of water.
They feel like they're being taken advantage of.
Florida's Attorney General saying her call center has taken more than 3,000 calls.
That's sickening, it's disgusting, it's unacceptable, and we're not going to have it.
Amid fears of widespread flooding and catastrophic storm surge on both coasts, in Fort Myers, search and rescue teams are already gearing up.
This is serious, and we cannot take chances. It is life-threatening. This is not a storm you can sit and wait through.
Millions under a state of emergency up the East Coast, Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. 25 years ago, another deadly Category 5 hurricane, Andrew, sliced through Florida. But Irma's nearly twice as big as that storm and wider than the entire state of Florida. making it harder for evacuees to escape the storm's path. Given the storm's forecast, where can people go to escape this thing?
They need to go to one of our shelters, and they need to go quick. And matter of fact, that's the place to go.
Miami's Metro Zoo, rebuilt after Andrew leveled it, is now bracing for another devastating blow. And across South Florida, families and their pets are streaming to newly opened shelters.
Oh, it's frightening, extremely frightening.
Morgan Chesney's Gonzalez and her family are spending their first night away from home.
We didn't really want to take any chances because I have children, and so we decided then that, before the rush of everybody trying to make a mass exodus, then we would try and get ahead.
Ahead of the frantic rush to outrun Irma before it's too late.
And with a wind field that extends almost 400 miles across, if you count tropical storm force winds, we are going to see impacts, as you heard there, from the entire state just about. In some areas we've picked out here, Marathon, Florida is one area where we could see tropical storm force gusts as early as Saturday morning through Sunday afternoon. So you could have a sustained period of time of tropical storm force winds. Then Saturday afternoon through Sunday morning, you could be getting into hurricane force winds. So this is when, if there will be damage, this is when most of that damage will be. Rainfall 8 to 12 inches and up to 10 feet of surge expected here in Marathon. Miami, one of the bigger cities to be impacted. We'll start with tropical storm force winds Saturday morning. They'll continue through late Sunday, but in that time period, as we see Irma make its closest approach and maybe landfall just to your southwest on the current forecast track, 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts or greater. This could be a conservative estimate with rainfall 12 to 18 inches. Add on top of that a water rise of 10 feet. We will see significant surge flooding in and around the Miami area and along the East Coast. Fort Myers, Saturday afternoon through Monday morning, tropical storm force wind gusts, hurricane force wind gusts start moving in as soon as Sunday, 75+ mile per hour, causing damage, bringing trees down. And imagine we'll see power out here too, even in the Fort Myers area, with 5 to 8 inches of rainfall expected. And as far north as Orlando, we're expecting tropical storm force wind gusts Sunday morning through Monday morning. And within that period of time, hurricane force wind gusts late Sunday into Monday morning with rainfall 8 to 12 inches on its current path. So Orlando actually ends up being one area that you could actually end up on the east side of the storm where some of the strongest winds may be. West Palm Beach, another area that could get some of the strongest winds. Tropical storm force winds as early as Saturday morning. Wind gusts 100+ miles per hour on Sunday as we see Irma make its closest approach, passing just to the west of West Palm Beach. In the heavy rain with 12 to 18 inches, and your storm surge could be up to 10 feet. So West Palm Beach, Miami, these are areas that could see some significant impacts here from Irma as we head on through Saturday night into Sunday, when we should see some of the strongest winds come on in. So hopefully everybody's prepared now. They've taken their actions and they are ready to hunker down or get out of town as we head on through the next couple of days and through the upcoming weekend. Nick?
And Ray, a lot of people are getting out of town, so many that it's causing all kinds of traffic tie-ups, which we just would expect to see during evacuations. Look at the red on the map here on I-75, all the way from south of Ocala, all the way up into southern Georgia. Red on the map, it turns green there, but there are other areas of red all along the way, even before you get to Atlanta and even beyond that as well. You need to know your evacuation zone. FloridaDisaster.org is where to find that. Determine your evacuation route as well as your zone. There are several zones here through Florida, particularly the Keys, as many as 5 zones. Key Largo in 5, Key West in Zone 1. All of those zones have had mandatory evacuations. In Collier County, Florida, there's a mandatory evacuation for Goodland, Everglades City, Chokoloskee, and it's strongly being advised for anyone in a mobile home. In Lee County, a mandatory evacuation Friday for the Barrier Islands as well as for mobile homes. In Pinellas County, it's mandatory evacuations Friday beginning at 6 a.m. for Zone A, including mobile homes. And in St. Johns County, a mandatory evacuation begins 6 a.m. Saturday for Zones A and B in St. Augustine, Hastings, and mobile homes. Well, stay with us. We'll continue to keep you updated here on the progress of Irma as it moves closer and closer to Florida.
Powerful Category 5 storm. Hurricane Irma has its sights set on South Florida and maybe a significant chunk of the southeast. And one thing we'll add on top of rainfall and surge is going to be waves. And some of these wave heights could get pretty high here, as some of these wave heights 30 to 40 feet now, going through the islands of the Bahamas and maybe getting to South Florida here as we head on through Saturday night and Sunday, when we see Irma make its closest approach, maybe right down here Miami-Dade County, and maybe splitting the state right in half, Nick, as some of these wave heights could get to 40 feet. And you throw on top of that a 10-foot surge and 12 inches of rain.
That's going to be powerful, powerful water. And even if it, the center makes its way up more in this direction, we're going to have those powerful waves still making their presence known all along the coast of Georgia and South Carolina.
Yeah, and we've got strong high pressure to the north, too. You combine that with a strong low, we're going to have that onshore wind, as your wind's coming here out of the east and pushing in and pushing that water onto the east coast of Florida.
Yeah, and those waves are really going to be battering Florida for some time to come, and then on up toward the Georgia and South Carolina coast as we get into the latter part of the weekend and the first of next week.
Yeah, and these are areas too with your storm surge warning, something new this year, where, you know, even when you just get a strong onshore flow, some spots here around Miami-Dade County, actually around Key Biscayne and Biscayne Bay, actually flood. They call it the King Flood, I think, and just from an onshore flow. Now you throw a major hurricane into the mix, and we're going to see some significant water rise.
And the water rise could be particularly high here along the southwestern coast of Florida too, and even a little farther toward the north. We have storm surge watches all the way past Naples to Bradenton, Sebastian, down to West Palm Beach as well.
Yeah, and these are areas certainly where we're going to have to be on the lookout for that water rise, thus why we ask so many people to evacuate. As Hurricane Irma continues on its track, you're going to hear a lot about the storm surge impacts.
But what does it mean when we say it could reach 6, 7, even 10 feet? Our hurricane expert and former head of the National Hurricane Center, Dr. Rick Knabb, shows us just how high that water can reach and the impacts as it rises.
Now, it's one thing to show you what it looks like on a map. What would it look like in reality? Let's fantasize reality a little bit here. Let's start in that blue area. What would it look like if you had 1 to 3 feet of storm surge flooding? That's already bad, because just a couple feet of water can float a car and take it away. And it would be over the heads of children if you had 3 feet of storm surge flooding. Once we get to 3 feet, we're talking about life-threatening. You get above that, now you get to 6 feet, you're above my head. I don't want to be in that storm surge. It's not just the water getting higher, but the water is moving. There are dangerous battering waves on top of that, and there is stuff. This could easily take your life. And if it goes above 6 feet, it is fully capable of not just flooding the structure, but wiping it clean off the foundation. This is why storm surge is so life-threatening.
Yeah, that's why, Nick, there's high anxiety in Florida as people brace for Hurricane Irma.
Yeah, residents are not just worried about the destructive winds, but also about their critical infrastructure designed to hold the water back and keep neighborhoods from a flood disaster.
NBC's Terry Sanders.
A reservoir flooding during Hurricane Harvey. Homes submerged, people scrambling to get out. That's the nightmare scenario in Florida for Marianne Martin.
It's a man-made hill.
And that's the dike?
Yes.
She lives near the Herbert Hoover Dike, holding back water from Lake Okeechobee. 40,000 at risk if that dike fails, as happened in New Orleans during Katrina.
This is not a case of you just crossing your fingers then?
No, it's not. And I hope I don't have to regret saying that.
A warning the Florida governor is issuing tonight.
The biggest risk on the dike at Okeechobee is too much rain. That's why they're lowering levels.
Lake Okeechobee so large it's visible from outer space, more than 700 square miles. Now, the race to lower water levels, critical because with just 1 foot of rain from Irma, the lake will rise more than 3 feet. The dike, 90 years in the making, is in desperate need of critical repairs. A $1.5 billion fix is now underway. The Army Corps of Engineers recognizes the potential. Their own report says, depending on the potential location of a breach, the life loss, economic, and adverse environmental consequences of a breach are considered very high.
The floods would potentially inundate entire communities, and this is, of course, certainly something the Corps of Engineers wants to avoid at all costs.
That rushing water that you hear and sea is a desperate effort to get as much water out of the lake before Irma arrives. The Army Corps of Engineers says it believes the dike will hold, but Irma will dump more than 20 inches of rain.
Yeah, with the latest on Irma, we're looking at a storm that's still a Category 5 storm of pressure at 925 millibars.
And it's moving toward the west-northwest at 16 miles per hour. The track would take it right up into Florida Saturday evening, Sunday morning, and then northward from there.
Our coverage of powerful Category 5 Hurricane Irma continues now with our tropical update, and still with the 2 a.m. advisory from the Hurricane Center, it is still a Category 5 hurricane with winds at 160 miles per hour, 157 the threshold for Category 5. So right now we're just above that, 925 millibars from the last advisory. That is up by 5 millibars, so thus the corresponding wind speed traditionally does go down. 20 miles north of Grand Iguana Island, that is where right now we do have the center of the storm moving west-northwest at 16 miles per hour. Next update coming out from the Hurricane Center at 5 a.m. So just a little bit of time to go before we get that. Turks, Caicos, Bahamas, all under hurricane warnings. Parts of the northern coast of Cuba under either tropical storm warnings here or hurricane warnings in the areas in purple. And we should expect to see hurricane force conditions, hurricane force winds head into these areas that have not already been impacted within 24 hours. As you can see, parts of Cuba now starting to feel some of the effects of some of these tropical storm force winds. But if you notice here in the satellite picture, you can see a little bit less of the pinks and purples here, especially on the northern side of the eye wall. But this could just be a little bit of a break here that we're seeing, and maybe an eye wall replacement cycle from Irma. But at this point, we are seeing at least some subtle weakening, and the Hurricane Center actually forecasting some slight weakening as it heads towards South Florida, but still by Saturday evening a strong Category 4 storm, and somewhere between a strong Cat 4 storm and maybe a stronger Cat 3 storm as it heads toward the coast of Florida as we go on through Saturday night or early Sunday, and still by Monday evening a strong tropical storm as it heads into South Georgia. So impacts from tropical storm force winds could be felt as far north as northern Georgia, maybe into the western Carolinas. It's taking it off to the west, northwest, and eventually that turn toward the north. The real question is going to be, where does that turn occur? If it occurs over here, there'll be more impacts for the east coast of Florida and maybe into the coastal Carolinas and southeast Georgia, but still a chance we may see that track further on off toward the west, as the European model did do, and that can mean more impacts for the west coast of Florida and certainly out into parts of the Big Bend area and maybe into South Georgia. So we'll continue to keep an eye on the track. If we do see adjustments to the track, they would be coming up at 5 a.m. if the Hurricane Center thinks they are warranted with a new cone and a full advisory. Here's the latest warnings now. West Palm Beach now as far north off toward Naples and down through the Keys with hurricane warnings, and then we've got hurricane watches now, including Sarasota and Vero Beach. Most likely these watches and warnings as the storm gets closer will be extended on further toward the north. So the warnings mean have your preparations in place. The watch means within 36 hours we could see hurricane conditions, and notice it covers the entire state of Florida, at least the entire width here of the state of Florida. Well, meanwhile, parts of the Caribbean are still reeling from Hurricane Irma. The powerful storm cut a deadly path of destruction through the region, flattening entire communities. NBC's Morgan Radford has a look at the damage from San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Hurricane Irma ripping through the Caribbean, bringing death and destruction and leaving thousands homeless. In Barbuda, houses underwater, cars floating through the streets. Among the dead, a 2-year-old killed while a family was trying to escape. Most of the island left uninhabitable and almost impossible to reach. In St. Martin, homes with no power or running water. Businesses completely destroyed. Military planes sending emergency food and water. Thousands remain stranded, like David Elliott and Trey Harris, who traveled to Turks and Caicos from North Carolina for vacation. Now left with no choice but to ride out the hurricane.
We're trying to keep it as upbeat and positive here as we can. We keep assuring everyone back home that we are safe. We're in the safest spot on this island.
Puerto Rico was spared a direct hit, but raging winds tore down power lines and trees, smashing through Sammy's small restaurant.
Wow,
Now he has no income, just as tourists are beginning to arrive.
Almost 1 million people are still without power. That's why they've come to central markets like this to charge their cell phones, find running water, and get hot food.
No water.
No water, and there's no electricity.
No.
You get warm down here, it's hot, and with no electricity is the worst part.
But just as the cleanup begins, warnings tonight, another major hurricane may be on the way.
So we need to be bracing for a major hurricane, even into portions of the United States. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you could see tropical storm force winds. We've got this live picture courtesy of EarthCam. Still closely watching Irma's track to see how the hurricane will impact this state. A state of emergency has been declared in the Palmetto State. People along the coast should be aware of the risk for rip currents and coastal flooding as well. This is what we anticipate seeing the track once again. But, you know, if this goes a little bit more on the eastern portion, definitely lots of South Carolina, particularly the beaches there, are going to be impacted with high water, with waves, and with damaging winds as well. There's what the models are saying could happen, and there's not quite a lot of agreement here on the latest model run about where exactly this is going to go. Perhaps a little bit farther toward the northwest there through Georgia and up into Tennessee, or perhaps up into the Carolinas. But tropical storm force winds will be felt over a widespread area, certainly here over much of the Florida Peninsula, perhaps up into Georgia as well as South Carolina. There's a pretty good chance of seeing that. As far as hurricane winds, hurricane force winds, probably just a slight chance of seeing that beyond Florida, but a pretty good chance here, particularly in South Florida, of seeing those hurricane force winds. Again, the model taking it up through areas north of Cuba, south of the Bahamas, then probably making landfall close to South Florida there sometime as we get into Saturday evening, Saturday night, overnight on into Sunday, and then we'll be watching it continue to make its way northward, affecting the Florida Peninsula with gusty winds, lots of rainfall, and perhaps that storm surge and battering waves even on up toward the Georgia and the South Carolina coast. As far as rainfall is concerned, it could be prolific here around the Savannah, Georgia area, 7-8 inches possible, even farther toward the inland areas up toward Charleston, more like 3, 4, or 5 inches of rain. Well, stay with us. Our continuing coverage of Hurricane Irma continues right here on the weather.
This is serious, and we cannot take chances. It is life-threatening.
This is a dangerous storm.
There's no gas, there's no food, there's no ice, there's nothing.
Follow the news, follow the Weather Channel. I'm going to be very aggressive at getting the state ready. You need to be very aggressive at getting your family ready.
You are watching special coverage of our Hurricane Irma coverage right here on the Weather Channel. Welcome to our viewers watching on Local Now as well.
And South Florida, Nick, bracing for deadly winds and rain and high surge after Irma devastated the Caribbean, killing at least 12 people. And the Southeast will be feeling the effects of Irma for days to come.
New video showing just how devastating Hurricane Irma was to the island of Barbuda. Take a look at the aerial video of the destruction. Unfortunately, one person has died here in the French territory from Irma. We're told that 95% of the island is uninhabitable after taking the brunt of this Category 5 hurricane.
And certainly on the march here. And let's tell you what we know right now about Hurricane Irma. Miami-Dade evacuation orders now include 650,000 residents. That makes this the largest attempted evacuation of Miami-Dade County on record. Florida's governor has ordered all public schools, colleges, and universities to close Friday through Monday. 4,000 commercial airline flights in Irma's path have been canceled, and Irma is a deadly hurricane. Fortunately, at least 12 people have died in the islands. Nick.
We still have hurricane warnings out for much of the Caribbean. We're looking at possible hurricane force winds throughout the Turks and Caicos, on up through the Bahamas. The north coast of Cuba also under that hurricane warning, as is the northern coast of Haiti. And as of this evening, as of last evening, I should say, the hurricane warnings are up now for South Florida, including the Florida Keys, up through Miami, West Palm Beach, and Naples. And hurricane watches extend from one coast to the other, from Sarasota over toward Vero Beach. There is the eye of Irma going through the Turks and Caicos right now, just off toward the west, and continuing to move in a west-northwesterly direction, probably staying north of the of Cuba, but certainly could skim the coast here and make impacts all along the way before it makes its way up toward Miami. We've been talking about where it's going to make that turn. Well, if it makes that turn a little sooner than later, it could stay over water, maybe clip Miami and move a little farther toward the north, or it could move more this direction, making its way right along the west coast of Florida and on up toward Georgia. Whatever the case, we're going to experience hurricane force winds there most likely in southern Florida. Tropical storm force winds over the entire peninsula. And then, as it makes its way northward, we're going to find more gusty winds as well as heavy rainfall farther toward the north up into Georgia and South Carolina. Again, there are the hurricane warnings in South Florida. Hurricane force winds, a very real possibility. Damage, power outages, you need to be prepared. And of course, a lot of people are getting away from the area here as they evacuate northward up I-75 into Georgia. Well, we're continuing to watch other cities being affected. Let's talk about some of those specific cities now, Ray.
All right, Nick, thanks a lot. And yeah, some cities will have significant impacts, others pretty nasty winds, and it'll depend on where your exact location is and where the exact track of Irma is going to be. But let's go to Marathon first. And Saturday morning through Sunday morning, expecting to see tropical storm force wind gusts in excess of 40 miles per hour. There's a period of time here Saturday afternoon through Sunday morning where we could see some of the gusts exceed hurricane force. So this is when, if we do get damage, when most of it will be occurring. Rainfall 8 to 12 inches, and we'll certainly get flooding with a water rise or a storm surge of up to 10 feet. Out in Miami, Saturday morning through late Sunday, you'll probably have sustained 40-plus mile per hour winds, and then you'll get into maybe the 100 mile per hour winds, plus with some of the gusts late Saturday night into Sunday morning. This is when Irma makes its closest approach, as right now Hurricane Center has the center coming onshore just southwest of downtown Miami, and that's not a good thing. You'll end up on the northeast side or the eastern eye wall of that storm, potentially. 12 to 18 inches of rain, a surge of up to 10 feet, significant flooding likely in Miami-Dade County, especially southeastern Miami-Dade in and around the city of Miami. Now, Fort Myers on the west coast, 40-plus mile per hour winds Saturday afternoon until Monday morning, so prolonged period of tropical storm force wind gusts, hurricane on Sunday, 5 to 8 inches of rainfall possible here as we head on through the daytime hours on Sunday. And then as far north as Orlando, once again on its current track, tropical storm force winds in Orlando Sunday morning through Monday morning, so maybe some wind gusts for a 24-hour period that could exceed tropical storm force. And then late Sunday into Monday morning, throw on top of that some of those winds gusting 75-plus miles per hour. It's at this period of time where Irma's making its closest approach just to your west. And rainfall could be 8 to 12 inches. There will most likely be some localized flooding here in Orlando. West Palm Beach, 40-plus mile per hour winds going to be Saturday morning through Monday morning. Your impacts with a 100-plus mile per hour winds during the day on Sunday. So Sunday bearing the brunt of Irma with 12 to 18 inches of rainfall. It'll come down heavy and hard, up to 10 feet of storm surge too. So it's those coastal areas in southeast Florida, from that's basically just south of the Space Coast down through the Palm Beaches and down toward Miami-Dade County, where we could see some of the heaviest surge. So certainly is going to be some of the areas that get some of the heaviest surge and the heaviest rain southeast Miami, southeast parts of Florida. And if you're not yet prepared your emergency kit for hurricane season, there's no time to waste. Here are some of the things you'll need. Have a multi-purpose tool with instruments such as a can opener and a screwdriver. Be sure to have copies of important personal documents and a list of emergency contact information. You'll also want to have some extra cash around. Run out and get that as soon as you can. A first aid kit and a handheld charger for all of your devices. We'll have continuing coverage with more updates on Irma coming up, and just before 5 a.m., the latest advisory from the Hurricane Center. just a tremendous amount of damage here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Trees down, power out, and Irma continues to make its approach toward South Florida. And that damage extend into parts of the Bahamas, maybe even on the northern coast of Cuba, as we are gearing up for what looks like to be some major impacts here in the state of Florida and possibly even on into the southeastern U.S. So let's take a look at some of this damage with the trees, power lines down. It is going to take weeks to clean some of that up. Well, welcome back to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Irma. South Florida is gearing up to take the brunt of this storm as it comes on through. Meteorologist Mike Bettis shows us what preparations people are taking from Hallandale Beach.
Well, as Irma now moves closer and closer to Florida, high anxiety as this epic storm could wreak havoc along the east coast of Florida and right here in Hallandale Beach, basically halfway between Miami Beach and Fort Lauderdale, where the beaches have been pristine for years. They really haven't had to contend with a major natural disaster in a very long time. So there's a lot of buildup here and a lot of people and a lot of buildings in harm's way. We actually had the opportunity to put the drone up today and give you an aerial view of where we are here in Hallandale. And the beach is actually pretty